The WWE Universe was shaken to its core as Jon Moxley and Roman Reigns make their shocking returns at SummerSlam. Could the Shield be reforming, or are we heading for all-out war? In this video, we break down the dramatic returns of two of the biggest names in wrestling history. From the moment the lights dimmed to the crowd's explosive reaction, every second was pure chaos. Find out what this means for Seth Rollins, the Bloodline, and the future of WWE. The arena was already alive, buzzing, electric, charged with the kind of anticipation you can't script, only feel. It was SummerSlam. The air crackled with tension. Fans leaned forward in their seats, unaware they were moments away from witnessing one of the most chaotic nights in WWE history. In an event already bursting with headline-worthy drama, nobody expected this. Not tonight. Not like this. Earlier in the evening, the WWE Universe had erupted for what they believed would be the night's main event. A brutal contest featuring Seth Rollins defending his status, his faction, and perhaps his pride. And yet, just as the match reached its crescendo, just as it seemed Seth had finally climbed out of the chaos that had surrounded him in recent weeks, the lights began to dim. Not a typical production cue. Not a glitch. A calculated blackout. One that WWE fans have come to associate with one thing and one thing only, something earth-shattering. Then it hit. The sound of static tore through the arena speakers, followed by a bone-chilling silence. The crowd held its breath. For 5 seconds, there was nothing. Then, from the shadows of silence, came a low hum, then a heartbeat. Then, boom, a thunderous crash of pyrotechnics, and then, Jon Moxley's music. The arena exploded into an unhinged chaos. For a few moments, it didn't feel real. Moxley? Jon Moxley. The man who'd left WWE as Dean Ambrose years ago, whose journey through AEW had become a cornerstone of wrestling's modern era. Was he really back? Emerging from the smoke was a figure not quite like the Ambrose of old, but unmistakably Moxley. No flak jacket. No wild-eyed winks. He wore combat boots, blood-stained tape around his fists, and a glare so cold it sent shivers down every fan's spine. Moxley didn't wave. He didn't smirk. He simply walked down that ramp like a man possessed, and in the ring stood Seth Rollins, confused, stunned, jaw clenched. He hadn't seen this coming. Nobody had, but the shock hadn't even begun to settle before the night delivered its second nuclear bomb. As Moxley circled the ring like a vulture, the lights flickered again. This time, the hush in the crowd was even heavier. 2 returns in one night? No way. But WWE thrives on impossibilities, and tonight was the embodiment of it. The horns hit. The beat dropped. The arena trembled. Roman Reigns was back, the tribal chief. The head of the table. The man who had dominated WWE for nearly 4 years before vanishing after WrestleMania. Some said he was injured. Others claimed he was burned out. Rumors swirled: retirement, creative disputes, personal health. Nobody knew the truth, but what they did know in this moment was that Reigns wasn't just back. He was storming down the ramp like a man with a mission, and that mission was standing in the same ring as Seth Rollins and the newly returned Jon Moxley. It was like time folded in on itself. The Shield, broken and buried so many times, was once again sharing the same air. But this wasn't a reunion. It didn't feel warm. It didn't feel redemptive. It felt volatile. The crowd didn't know whether to chant Shield or scream Fight Forever. Some just stood frozen, hands clasped over their mouths, watching in disbelief as Reigns and Moxley slowly ascended opposite ring steps while Seth stood in the center of the ring, eyes darting from one brother to the next. The Shield was back. But the Brotherhood was dead. This wasn't about friendship. This was about unfinished business. Reigns entered the ring first, brushing past Seth as if he didn't exist. Moxley followed suit, walking the perimeter before sliding in, eyes locked on Roman, and for a long, chilling moment, no one moved. The 3 men who once ruled WWE stood in a silent triangle, every ounce of history weighing down the air between them. You could almost hear the echoes of their past, debuting in black vests under flickering lights, battling evolution, breaking up, betraying each other, bleeding for championships and pride. Seth was the first to speak. Not with a mic, not with words, but with a breathy whisper the cameras barely picked up. "What are we doing here?" Roman didn't answer. Moxley didn't blink. Then, out of nowhere, Moxley attacked. A flying forearm smashed into Seth's jaw, sending him crumbling to the mat. The audience roared in a mixture of awe and confusion. Was this a coordinated attack? A message? Or just Moxley being Moxley, chaotic, uncontrollable, a man without allegiance? Before Roman could even move, Moxley turned his back on Seth and stared straight into the eyes of the tribal chief. A smirk twitched at the edge of his lips. "You still running this place?" Moxley growled, loud enough for the arena mic to catch. Roman stepped forward, unfazed. "You think I ever stopped?" It was the kind of line that reminded everyone why Reigns has been at the top for so long, not just because of his power or dominance, but because of his presence. Even in silence, he commands every ounce of the room, but just as it seemed the two were about to lock horns, Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu charged the ring. The bloodline hadn't forgotten who the real enemy was, and it wasn't just Seth. It was Roman, the man who had left them. The man who had once led them with an iron fist, only to disappear when things got ugly. And now he was back, without warning, just as his cousins were finally claiming their piece of the empire. A fight broke out in seconds. Moxley held his own, throwing wild punches that sent security flying. Roman ducked a super kick from Solo and retaliated with a Superman punch that cracked like thunder. Seth, groggy but angry, staggered to his feet, only to get caught in a devastating Samoan drop from Jacob Fatu. The crowd was losing its mind. This wasn't a segment. This wasn't a setup. This was civil war. Shield versus Shield. Bloodline versus Tribal Chief. WWE versus Chaos. And in the midst of it all stood Jon Moxley, blood trickling from his lip, laughing like a man unchained. SummerSlam had promised fireworks. But nobody could have imagined this. An eruption that blew up every narrative WWE had built for the past 3 years. As referees and security scrambled to separate the men, fans chanted, "Holy sh*T" and "This is awesome" in a deafening chorus. Paul Heyman, watching from backstage, looked absolutely pale. What had started as a return had turned into a reckoning. And as the screen faded to black with Roman standing over a fallen Solo, Moxley disappearing into the crowd, and Seth clutching his ribs in the corner, one truth had become undeniable. SummerSlam didn't just set the stage for the future of WWE. It torched the past. Backstage chaos mirrored the storm unfolding inside the ring. Producers were yelling into headsets. Triple H had already left his seat at gorilla position, visibly shaken, walking briskly down the corridor with security and medics flanking him. WWE staff tried to restore order, but the damage was already done. This wasn't just a storyline gone off script. This was a narrative implosion. Reports from backstage later revealed that the moment Jon Moxley appeared, half the locker room gathered around the monitors, jaws slack, eyes wide. For the veterans, it was déjà vu. The ghost of Dean Ambrose had returned, but not as a friend. For the new stars, Braun Breaker, Carmelo Hayes, and Austin Theory, it was a wake-up call. Whatever power structures they thought were in place had just been obliterated by two men who'd redefined the industry. Again, Moxley's return had been whispered about for months. Rumors swirled that he and WWE had reopened talks, but no one truly believed it would happen, especially not tonight. Not with AEW contracts still looming and the real-life tension between Moxley and WWE's upper brass hanging heavy in the air. And yet, here he was, unapologetically violent, undeniably present, and apparently ready to pick a fight with anyone breathing. Roman's return was no less seismic. After WrestleMania, he'd vanished. There was no farewell, no injury update, just silence. Some fans speculated he was healing. Others believed he'd been forced out after bloodline fractures turned public. In truth, no one knew what happened behind the thick, steel doors of Stamford's war room. But one thing was clear: his silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Now, back on the front lines, Roman Reigns wasn't here to retake a throne. He was here to destroy it, and rebuild a new empire with his own hands. But to do that, he'd have to go through the very men he once bled beside. Seth Rollins was transported to the medical room following the segment. WWE later confirmed that he suffered internal bruising and a cracked rib, though they clarified no permanent damage had occurred. But emotionally, Seth was wrecked. In exclusive backstage footage released later that night, he could be heard yelling at WWE staff, "You tell me if that was part of the script. You tell me. Was it real? Was it a work?" The lines blurred so viciously that fans were left stunned. Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube lit up within seconds. Is Moxley back for real? Is Roman turning on the bloodline? Did Seth even know? Conspiracies abounded. Some claimed it was an elaborate Triple H master plan. Others insisted Seth was genuinely blindsided. But perhaps the most unnerving truth was the one no one wanted to say out loud. Nobody was in control anymore. That night, Roman Reigns didn't join the bloodline. He didn't even look their way. When Solo Sikoa glared at him, Roman's eyes told 1,000 unspoken truths. There was no welcome. There was no forgiveness. There was only contempt. Jacob Fatu, fresh off his recent championship defense, stood behind Solo like a lion ready to pounce. But he never attacked Roman directly. No, he watched. Studied. As if waiting to see if the man who once led them still had enough venom in his fangs. And then there was Moxley, the wild card, the walking war dot. He hadn't aligned with anyone. He didn't shake Roman's hand. He didn't hug Seth. He struck, smiled, and left, vanishing into the sea of fans like a mad prophet. But his actions sent one message loud and clear. He's not back for nostalgia. He's back for vengeance. Later, in a post-show exclusive captured by a handheld backstage cam, Moxley was seen throwing his duffel bag into a truck before a staffer caught up with him. "John, what does this mean? Are you here for Roman?" "Seth?" Moxley turned his head, blood still trickling from a cut on his cheek. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He simply said, "You ever bury a ghost and think it's gone, just to have it climb out of the dirt? That's me. And I've got unfinished business." Then he slammed the truck door shut and disappeared into the night. The implications of that moment echoed far beyond the ring. Back at Titan Towers, the phone lines were melting down. Fox executives, USA Network reps, and streaming partners were demanding answers. What was next? Who booked this? Is this leading to a Shield reunion? A civil war? Ratings were through the roof, but stability was in ashes. Triple H, the man responsible for overseeing creative, was said to be both ecstatic and nervous. In a hushed production meeting after the show, he was reportedly overheard saying, "We've opened Pandora's box. Now we ride the storm." And the WWE Universe? They couldn't get enough. Shield 2.0 began trending globally. Fan edits flooded TikTok. One particularly viral clip merged the moment the lights went out with the haunting sound of a heartbeat and the flicker of an old Shield promo captioned, "Brotherhood doesn't die. It comes back angrier." Meanwhile, in the locker room, things weren't celebratory. There was an eerie tension. Seth Rollins, now stitched and cleared, stormed into his private suite with Becky Lynch by his side. She was visibly shaken. Seth's jaw was tight, his voice hoarse. "You think this is a game to them?" He snapped to no one in particular. "Moxley walks in here like he owns the place and Roman just returns without a word? Nah. I'm done playing family. Next time they step in that ring with me, I finish what I started." Back at the arena, fans slowly exited, many still glued to their phones, trying to piece together what had just happened. It was no longer about who won or lost matches earlier in the night. It was about that moment, the moment when past and present collided, when three fractured souls reminded the world why they are icons. SummerSlam had become something else entirely. It was no longer a pay-per-view. It was a battlefield, and the war had only just begun. In the coming days, WWE would release a teaser on social media. No logos. No music. Just a slow-motion clip of Moxley walking through smoke, Roman standing tall under flickering lights, and Seth sitting on a steel chair in an empty ring, wrapping his fists. A single line flashed across the screen. There are no brothers in war. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't about titles. It wasn't about factions. It was personal, and it was going to tear WWE apart. Backstage, WWE's war room was no longer just a metaphor. It was a war room now. Emotionally, strategically, and reputationally. Executives were pulling overtime, not to script the next episode of Raw or SmackDown, but to deal with the fallout of what had just occurred on the grandest stage of the summer. SummerSlam had rewritten everything, and now the fallout was nuclear. The next morning, WWE headquarters in Stamford was flooded with media inquiries. Wrestling outlets, sports broadcasters, even mainstream media giants like ESPN, CNN, and BBC News began pushing headlines. Moxley returns, Reigns breaks silence, Shield implodes in real time. Public speculation ran wild. Was this all part of a long-term plan? Or had WWE cracked open a vault of chaos they no longer controlled? Triple H, silent for the first few hours after the event, finally posted a cryptic tweet. "We told you SummerSlam would be unforgettable. We didn't say how." No further comment. No clarification. Just fuel to the firestorm already raging across the internet. Meanwhile, Roman Reigns had yet to say a word, not to WWE, not to the media, not to the fans. He left the arena through a side corridor, shielded by a sea of black-clad security, and climbed into a blacked-out SUV. The door slammed shut with finality, and the vehicle disappeared into the Las Vegas night. That silence from Roman? It was intentional. Calculated. A message in itself, and perhaps that's what made Jon Moxley's post-event behavior even more jarring. Just 24 hours later, Moxley was spotted at a local dive bar on the edge of the city, leather jacket, whiskey in hand, alone. When approached by a fan asking for a selfie, he didn't wave them off. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "You might want to remember this face. 'Cause next time I show up, someone's not walking out." The words went viral in minutes. By the time Raw came around the following Monday, the WWE Universe was bracing for anything. The arena was sold out. The lines outside wrapped around city blocks. Inside, fans were buzzing like live wires. Nobody knew what to expect. Would Seth show up? Would Moxley return? Would Roman speak? The lights dimmed as the show began, and WWE's opening pyro was replaced by silence and a dim, cold blue wash over the crowd. Then, the guitar riff hit, Seth Rollins, draped in black. No fireworks. No flashy jacket. Just a man with something to say and a score to settle. He marched to the ring, mic already in hand, fire in his eyes. When the crowd finally settled, Seth's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You think you can walk into my ring, ruin my moment, and get away with it?" He paused, the crowd unsure whether to cheer or hold their breath. "You think I forgot what you did, Mox? You think I forgot what you did, Roman? I built this company while you both ran away." The crowd murmured, "I bled for this place. I carried it on my back while you..." He looked into the hard camera, teeth clenched, "While you vanished, Roman. While you sold your soul to chaos, Moxley. And now you're back? For what? To play heroes again? No." He took a deep breath. "This time, I finish what I should have finished years ago. You want war? You just walked into hell." The lights went black. The crowd screamed. But this time, it wasn't Moxley. It wasn't Roman. It was Paul Heyman. He walked out, not with his usual theatrical flair, but slowly, cautiously, like a man walking across thin ice. He entered the ring, holding no mic, only a piece of paper. Seth looked at him, confused, tense, on edge. Heyman raised the paper and handed it over. Seth snatched it and began reading. His face changed, confusion turning to shock, then horror, then rage. He crumpled the paper and threw it to the ground. "You're joking, right?" Heyman shook his head solemnly. The document had been served. A contract. For a triple threat match, Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns versus Jon Moxley. No disqualifications. No countouts. No interference. Venue: WWE Crown Jewel. The crowd lost their minds. Seth was pacing now, breathing heavy. You really want to see me lose my mind, don't you? He hissed. You really want to see me burn the house down? He turned to Heyman. Then fine. You bring them both. You bring the tribal fraud and the lunatic reject, and I'll burn every last piece of them. But Heyman still wasn't done. He raised a second sheet of paper. And what's that? Seth demanded. Heyman hesitated. Then said, almost reluctantly, it's a contract for the reformation of the Shield. If you win. The crowd gasped. Seth blinked. What? Heyman clarified. It's a clause. Triple H wants ratings. He wants drama. If you, and only you, win this match, you get full creative control over the future of the Shield. Name. Brand. Legacy. Seth's breath caught. The ultimate revenge. Rebuilding the Shield in his own image. No more betrayal. No more chaos. Just him on top. He looked directly into the camera and whispered, deal. Backstage, the reactions were immediate. Sami Zayn shook his head in disbelief. Kevin Owens looked furious. Becky Lynch, pacing in the locker room, reportedly said, he's walking into a war zone. But it didn't matter, the match was now official. And the fallout was irreversible. Over the next week, vignettes aired like cinematic trailers for a psychological thriller. Roman Reigns appeared in black and white, standing on a beach at dusk. They forgot who I am, he said softly. Let me remind them. Jon Moxley was filmed in a desert scrapyard, lighting a cigar and staring into the fire. If it bleeds, I'm hunting it. And Seth Rollins was alone in a church, sitting in a pew, staring at a broken stained glass window. I've forgiven them before, he whispered. But this time, I bury them. The Shield had been born in violence, and now years later, it would die in it.as. The final week before Crown Jewel approached, WWE leaned into the madness. Every promotional poster featured their silhouettes standing in a triangle of fire. The tagline, forgiveness, is for the weak. The wrestling world held its breath. What began as a shocking moment at SummerSlam had turned into an all-out reckoning. Brotherhood was over, legacy was on the line, and only one man would walk out with it all. The days leading up to Crown Jewel were unlike any WWE build in recent memory. This wasn't just a promotional campaign, it felt like a funeral procession, a countdown to the death of something sacred. WWE's social feeds went silent for hours at a time, then returned with cryptic quotes and haunting visuals. No flashy taglines. No generic promos. Just silence.